They said getting started was the hardest part, but no one told you how hard it is to scale a custom service business. It's time for your team to step up, but your clients want you. Discover how to scale to 7 figures and beyond by freeing up time and getting your team to run whole parts of the company so you can focus on scaling profits. This is the Hands Off CEO with Mandy Ellefson.
Hi there, this is Mandy Ellefson. I am the host of the Hands Off CEO podcast. I have Brian Regienczuk here. Did I say that right, Brian?
That's right. Perfect.
Okay, great. I have Brian here on the podcast today. He's the founder of Agency Spotter, and he has a mission to liberate the data that helps professionals make better decisions around service suppliers, like marketing agencies. And Brian helps and consults with top executives in the space while leading the growth of Agency Spotter's 2 products, Spot Source and Agency Spotter. And really what the reason why I'm having Brian here on the podcast is, Brian and I have connected a little bit over the past year or so, and I'm really impressed with what he's been doing at Agency Spotter as far as helping agencies be able to actually get spotted by some of these larger companies. But he's been sharing with me some of the work that he's been doing with some new platforms, and it's really innovative. And I'm excited to be talking with Brian here today because he actually is going to be sharing today with how do you get your foot in the door with these bigger organizations when you have a smaller agency, smaller footprint, but maybe you do really good quality work. How do you get your foot in the door? And then once you have your foot in the door, how do you actually expand that out into other parts of the organization so that you can really grow your company within the corporation. So Brian, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Mandy.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. So we had talked about before, that there's specific gates that have to be kind of unlocked to go through to be able to sell to these larger corporations. So what are some of these gates they need to get through? Who are the gatekeepers? Like, why don't you just share with us some of your knowledge on how to get past these different roadblocks to generating these high level clients?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's not rocket science, right? I've been in this space over 20 years at Coca-Cola. I've consulted with brands like General Motors and Bacardi and all sorts of big companies. And what I found is the first thing you've got to do is make sure you're top of mind at the right moment, right? People aren't looking for a new agency every single day, right? But when they are ready and they have the budget, or they know they're about to get the budget approved and they're really engaged in looking, that's the moment you want to be there. You want to make sure your agency or consulting firm's name is right at the top of their mind. So that's really the first gate for folks, is how do you position yourself not in their face all the time, but at the right time. The second thing is making sure that you're actually a good fit for what they're looking for, right? So, and don't be afraid to say you're not a good fit when somebody comes to you with something that is outside of your comfort zone, and it's not something you want to stretch your agency on your first engagement with a big customer on, right? Be honest and be truthful. That's another way to stick in people's minds and really help them remember you as somebody they can trust and can come to when they do have that right project or their right engagement. After you kind of make it through, that first threshold of like being remembered at the right moment, you're starting that relationship and you're probably being evaluated with, sometimes only 2 other agencies, but sometimes a handful, right? At that moment, it's really important to understand, is this just one decision maker that's that's at play here, or are there other folks who are contributing to the decision making? Is my contact's boss, actually, do they have a favorite already that they're pushing for? And maybe it's not me, right? All those things are really important to understand, right, as kind of a second gate. And because, especially if you're a small or medium-sized company, agency, you have to understand, is this worth, how much of my time and my people's time is this worth, right? And I would say that's the second thing you've got to evaluate is, what are my chances of actually getting this, right? So knowing, who's involved on the decision maker side, but also who you're competing against. You may not know the name, and they may not be able to tell you who it is, but they may be able to tell you how many folks. Are they all small agencies like mine? Am I the only small one and everybody else, the other 2 or 3 folks, are larger, right? They may be able to give you some guide rails to help you better understand and better position yourself as you move forward. That would be kind of the next kind of tranche to go through. And, let's say it is a good fit for you. It is something that you feel like you have a really good shot at. The next thing you've got to think about is how you're going to be evaluated, right? So you're probably submitting some kind of a pitch deck or a proposal or something to them, and you're probably going to be given an opportunity to talk and ask questions. For all of the different engagements we've run where we're helping companies find agencies in a more formal setting, most of the Agency Spotter is self-service. So marketers come there for free to find agencies like yourselves, and it's small, medium, and large companies looking for all different types of agencies. But we do every year do sometimes a dozen, sometimes 20 different searches where we actually are involved, very engaged throughout the process. And what I've found, I've always been surprised at how many agencies don't ask questions, and they don't probe further. They kind of get the brief and they ask a few, very surface level questions, but they don't dig deeper. And, in playing that kind of consultant role to these bigger companies, a lot of times I have to kind of make sure it's a fair and even playing field. So if another agency does ask a question that you didn't think of, I always try to make sure our team circles back with you to let you know, hey, this was asked, here's the answer, so that you understand everybody has the same kind of working knowledge in terms of engaging. But make sure you come in with questions, and that's your first chance to impress, I think, and stand out. You're receiving the brief. Be ready to ask smart questions around and feel and own your knowledge space, at that moment. That's that first impression. And a lot of times that's the first impression for beyond the one decision maker you may have that relationship with or that remembered you. It's the first impression for the other folks who tend to be on those calls where they're briefing you, you have that chance to ask questions, use it.
That's great. I'm going to stop you here for a second.
Yeah.
Brian, every time you hit against the
I'm sorry.
Noise with that, so just be aware of that.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So after that moment, it really is about you and your response to the brief. It's about understanding who you're pitching. So if you're pitching a brand that is very much sensitive to some of the Black Lives Matter stuff that's going on right now, like you've seen many brands come out, in supporting that, making sure your response is appropriate and your team is appropriately positioned, knowing who your audience is, knowing what they're asking you to achieve. We ran a pitch out in California for a pretty large, more on the public side, but a pretty large pitch, and it was a very diverse company. The brief had in it that they were looking to, for an agency that could speak and had a track record of speaking to, Latinx and other minorities. And three of the agencies came in, and you could tell that they had really put effort into it. They talked about their own team and how that, they were living in the same neighborhoods. They had that experience. And, one of the agencies kind of fell flat. Like they just showed what felt like more like cookie cutter work, that, even though there were Latinos in it, they didn't really, it could have been anybody, right? They didn't really get it, and they missed the mark. So really understanding what the brief is and who your customers are and what their sensitivities are. I would say a lot of agencies fall back on trying to do too much and say they're great at everything. Mm-hmm. So, owning a space and being able to come from that point of strength around it, make sure that comes through, and the why is really clear, why you are that expert, why you are different. And it doesn't just seem like you're just like the other three or agencies, or you're not standing out. So
this is really great information, not just for people who, not just for agency owners who are actually going out for and pitching to these much larger corporations, but it sounds like this is applicable to any kind of agency, actually, because even working with smaller clients, because here are the things, these are the different gates that I've heard you say so far. The first gate, and correct me if I got it wrong, is that you need to be top of mind at the right moment. And I think that's applicable for any time you're going to be hired on as an agency, and has to be the right fit. So you qualifying what you just said just a moment ago, I think is really critical, where the agencies that are winning the business are the ones that are positioned with a specialty, the ones who have owned a space at a strength, and they're not trying to be everything to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are times when, a client, especially if you are targeting a mid-sized client, right? Not the largest client. There are times when they come in and they're looking for, a full service, like an agency that can do everything for them. But, that they're usually not looking for a boutique, small firm at that point. They're usually looking for a medium size or somebody a little bit larger. So if you are going after a large client, and you are a smaller agency, I would say really focusing on what you're good at and not trying to be everything is one of your critical points of differentiation. When I left Coca-Cola, that was one of the things we kept, all of the executives were a bit tired of working with the big, agency holding companies. And we were actually actively looking for agencies that brought something new to the table, that were boutique, that were independent. And I think that still is carrying through today, that a lot of folks, while the bigger agencies may have a place, all of them are still looking to augment that, some of their core talent and their core agencies with, specialized people who understand either an audience, understand a channel, or have some other thing that maybe those other bigger agencies don't bring to the table or can't quite get right.
I'm loving this, because what you're actually saying is that these larger companies are actually looking for specialists, and the agencies that think, well, in order for me to win this project, I need to be able to do this and this and this. Otherwise, they won't want to work with us. But you're actually saying the opposite.
I am. And, the data proves that out. So even if you go to Agency Spotter and you go to the brands pages that we have, this is just an aggregator. They're aggregator pages of agencies and what big brands those agencies have worked for. Now we only create a brand page on there when we also have people from the brand actively coming to and using our platform. But you can see that there's hundreds of big brands that do that, where we have brand pages, and you can see stats on them. And when you see the makeup of, let's say they have 50 or 100 agencies that we know of, on our platform that work with them or have worked with them, you'll see that there's a mix. Almost every single one of them has small agencies, medium agencies, and some large agencies that work for them. And, you can see the percent breakdown of how that, by size, how that kind of plays out. And it's something that as we rolled out our newest software, SpotSource, which is more of an enterprise play to help these larger companies manage their agency portfolios, their roster of agencies inside their own companies, we've seen this hold true. So that indicator that we have kind of on Agency Spotter around brands and the breakdown of a very diverse set of sizes of agencies, as we're inside these big companies and looking at their full roster now in a private enterprise play, we're seeing that same thing hold true. We're working with brands like Nike and Unilever and HP, and they're all, the mix is there, right? When you're looking across those Fortune 500 companies. And so they're continuing to look for, fresh talent or, somebody to augment the team in this country or in this market, and so forth. Yeah.
Well, I love that you've shared that, because here's the thing is, this is what I see with agencies is the ones that are trying to be everything to everyone can't scale. And even though they might look like they're very successful on the outside, they're actually not very successful on the inside. They're not very profitable. And they're very top heavy with very high level skill people, and they just can't scale it. And it's very difficult to actually source the right kind of talent, because it takes years to actually develop them. Yeah. So that's what we're seeing. Also, what we're also seeing is that the agencies that specialize, we're seeing them increase their fees from 50 to 300%. They actually can increase their fees, be more profitable, and it's easier to sell. And you're even validating that with the data that you're finding. Yeah, no, that's true. What we see with a lot of the agencies that, smaller, medium-sized agencies that go after kind of being full service, they tend to kind of they might have started mid-market, but then they start moving down market. They're set up to almost service a certain size client, and they can't get beyond that. And they also can't take on too many clients. The whole scaling problem that you mentioned is, when they try to, they fail. And then sometimes that hurts some of their best relationships, right? So they start underperforming. So I think today, with all the data that's out there, I mean, we're a review site on Agency Spotter, our enterprise software that helps big companies privately manage their suppliers, service suppliers like agencies. Reviews are a huge part of that as well. Many other pieces of data too, but once you start underperforming, people are going to know it. And, it's just like a restaurant, right? You get a couple bad Yelp reviews and people stop coming, right? So you don't want that. You want to it's now more than ever, the transparency is going to find you one way or another. So make sure you're set up for success and you help your people and your team be successful as they work with each of your clients. And what I've seen this, and maybe I'd like to hear if you're seeing something different, is that we're seeing agencies, they're able to continue the level of quality, but it's at the expense of the owner working more and more hours, or the top executives, because they haven't had the ability to transfer over those skills. Have you seen that too? Absolutely. Yeah. Whether it's the main, owner, or whether it's maybe they have one kind of number two, right? That is also kind of, working 80 hours a week or something, that's unsustainable. If you want to have, any kind of work-life balance. I think the cool thing about being an agency owner and doing your own thing is that a lot of the times the work you put in, helps you reap the benefits of it, right? You're taking on a new client, you're making more money, but if you don't over time put that reward back into the company and into your people and building and
offloading some of your own skills, it's not sustainable, right? You can't work, you're going to have a week or two where you're sick. You're going to have, a new client come on that demands way more of your skills than you can give. And one of your clients or two of your clients are going to not get the service they expect. And, it's setting yourself up for failure in one way or another.
Yep. I absolutely agree with that. I wanted to come back to a point that you had made earlier about in this RFP process. It sounds like they're not asking questions. Now, I think that this is a common problem, not just in an RFP process, but in the sales process for consultants or for agency owners, where they're not digging deep enough to actually ask questions. And all the 80-hour week type of challenges, I think, are directly impacted by basically them being lousy at selling. Right? And not actually getting to the pain of it. Is that what you're seeing with some of these agencies that are failing at winning these proposals?
I mean, there is some of it's selling, some of it's you might in the briefing or whatnot, you might have one of your creative directors in there too, but you've got to always be curious, right? Sometimes the agencies that stand out, it's not because they're smarter than the other, folks in the room or that are evaluating it, but they have one team member that is like insatiably curious, and they ask just a couple extra questions, and there are ones that nobody is like, oh, I never thought of that, and it makes you pause, and you get that a little bit extra consideration going to your agency, and everybody in the room feels it, right? Or on the phone, on the web, the Zoom video. So, and then they talk about it afterwards, right? So that's kind of the other secret is like, hey, they talk about it afterwards. If you can follow up with, right after you get out of that room, if you have something you can send to them, to your stakeholder or just everybody that was in the room, one little takeaway or new idea or something that you can add in, like that stuff stands out. It just sets you apart again. And if it's before they all get back, to talk about what happened, where it's, what comes in and they actually look at it on their phone, it's easy to look at or digest on, something simple or easy to look at on your phone, your stakeholder might bring it up, right? And they throw one more thing out in that kind of assessment session. So it's,
that is really a sharp tip. So you're saying that you have some little tip that you're ready to send them immediately after the meeting, so you stand out.
Yeah. I think I've seen that work before, and there's lots of little tactics like that people much better at selling than I am, have come across. But that's one that I've seen a few folks do, and it worked. It gave them a little bit more talking time in that recap. And along with other things they did, I think those things all add up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So do you think that's better in written format or in like a short video or like a PDF that you have? What do you think is the best medium for that?
I think if you know the schedule of how they're going to be meeting with the other agencies, if you know your first or if you know your last and it's like all in one day, or if it's over two days, then, the format might help you. That might help you choose which format to use, because you don't want to send a video if you were the last agency and they're going to be discussing right after this, like they're not going to have time to watch a video, like they're going to be meeting. So I think it just a little bit depends on where you fell in that schedule and whether it was a 1 or 2 day schedule for them. Yeah.
I love that. Great. That's a great tip. So do you have any other suggestions for when you're working with multiple stakeholders like that, and maybe even invisible stakeholders you're not even aware of?
Yeah. I think that's one of the first opportunities, like I was saying, that when you first get the inkling that there is something you can work on, start asking those probing questions. And they don't have to be hard questions, but you look up on LinkedIn who's this person's boss or their boss's boss, right? And say, hey, I know that Ogilvy or DDB or whoever it is, that's relevant, is your agency of record in this space. Are you guys talking to them about this? Is this relevant, for the work you do? Is your boss or your boss's boss, are they kind of pushing for, Edelman get to win this work, right? Use little tidbits of information and just ask a probing question, and they may come out of left field and say, no, but here's what is happening, right? And it just gives people a chance to open up to you. Yeah.
I love that. And what it kind of sounds like to me is that you're selling to objections. Like you're looking at what are all the reasons they're going to say no, and then have questions to ask to be able to pull out the information that you need.
Yeah. I mean, if you position yourself to every customer the same way, you're going to win some deals, right? But if it's a client you really, really want, right, you go that extra mile, you really feel out that landscape with questions and any other research you can do. And, even you may have another stakeholder that's not involved in your pitch, but they're an insider on a team that, sits next to the team that's working with you, right? Or potentially could work with you. Like, ask them, right? Ask them, hey, is there anything that you think would help us stand out? We're about to go in front of, your colleagues, do you have any tips, right? Because they've been in those shoes. They've probably reviewed agencies in the past. So you never know. Companies do have cultures, and sometimes they're unknown to you until you're working with them and you're inside. And so getting any inside scoop on what that culture is or what they expect from a pitch, or what maybe has stood out to other teams, similar to the one that you're pitching, all that stuff helps.
Yeah, this is really good tips there. So one of the things that we had talked about before is how you have your platform and everything you've been doing it really helps agencies and also the brands that you're working with to be able to intermingle. I don't know how you would describe that and I imagine that's really good for the agencies, because then they can go and work in other departments. How does one go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a really huge challenge for smaller agencies. So, and throughout my career, I think it's so important for people to kind of have those moments where they can just talk to each other and engage. And it doesn't have to be about like, what's my next piece of work, right? I mean, you don't want to always feel hungry, even if you are, right? So we've tried to find moments or ways that people can engage on our public platform. So Agency Spotter, I mean, we are sharing, projects that agencies post. We're sharing reviews that come in. We're putting it out there in articles, but also on LinkedIn and lots of other places, social media. And, it's a chance for agencies to celebrate one another. And sometimes it's not the sexiest work, right? But like, maybe it had really good results for that specific brand in that industry. Mm-hmm. And if it did, we want to celebrate it. We want to get the word out. So there's things like that help people interact or discover one another in ways that maybe don't happen normally. And it's not like, Ad Age. It's not like, some of the other magazines that are very much focused on the top 300 biggest, digital and advertising agencies or whatnot. We're, I think, in a lot of ways, the champion of the small and medium-sized agencies on the public site. And then on our newer platform, Spot Source, we are serving, number one, are the big Fortune 500 companies on that side of what we do. And if you are in there, as an approved agency for one of these big companies, we've designed it in a way that makes it much easier for you to be seen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? And compete with those larger agencies in some ways where they have refined the ability to spider web inside these complicated organizations, right? They have lots of manpower and account managers and other folks who can go to lunch and do different things, and they're speaking on, lots of panels. And, small agencies, small and medium-sized agencies don't have the budget or the manpower to do all of those things all the time. And so we've designed that private system to help you shine for the work you do, for the reviews you get inside that company. And we've also made it easy for you to see not only the people you've worked with, but also other people who identify as having worked with you. Maybe they were just on one of the project teams or behind the scenes reviewing work you were doing and you didn't know, right? We make it easy for you to draw those connections inside that ecosystem.
So you're saying that platform is a great way to democratize. It sounds like the approach to actually generating new business.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically rolling that platform out at these companies around the world, right? So, it's not just one group that's using it; it's everybody that is using it, and they're all able to see, who are our approved agencies and who is good at this service. And you're sitting, your agency is right next to, or the work you're doing is being positioned right next to work that, large agencies are doing, agencies of record are doing. And so, and your team is positioned there too. So you're able to tag your team members and include them. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of, we're helping you integrate into that environment in a way that has been hard in the past.
Got it. So what are some of the ways that agencies can, with what they have right now already? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know you have this great agency spotter site that everyone should be joining, but what are some other tips that they can use to actually spider web into these organizations, like these larger larger companies have been able to do?
Yeah. If you're not in the door already, I mean, it is a hard road. I would say the first thing to look at, and it's obvious to the big agencies, but if there's a change in the CMO, and we all know, we've heard the tenure of the CMO is not that big, but it's not always about the CMO. You may be a user experience and web agency, and maybe you're focused on the chief digital officer or the VP of digital at that, of digital marketing at that agency. Find whoever your relevant stakeholder is, who is a budget holder. Watch for job changes at the companies you identify as being your position and your brand is going after. Maybe you work more on with brands in retail, or maybe you are positioned more on the B2B technology side of things, right? And whatever it is, like, carve up the Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 list, narrow it down to the ones that are more relevant to you. Take out the ones that don't really hire many agencies, so the Johnson & Johnsons of the world that do lots in-house, right? Unless you happen to be in one of the very niche areas that they do outsource, it's going to be really hard to get in to some of those. They just don't hire that many agencies volume-wise. And get down to a list that's manageable, but is still wide enough where you're going to see enough change, over the course of a year or two, that there's multiple opportunities coming in. Yeah.
Really smart. And that's easy enough to find on LinkedIn, right? Because the job changes.
Yeah. And there's lots of ways you can, set up Google searches that automatically email you, when, there's a new CMO at whatever X, if you've narrowed it down to a certain number of brands, you can use those keywords. So there's lots of tricks out there that others have written about, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, are there any books that you would recommend on the subject? You said that others have written about.
Oh, that's a tricky question. You're putting me on the spot.
I know we didn't talk about that before. So.
Yeah, there's so many great books. I don't have one specific to this on the top of my tongue. I have the things I read tend to be more on the branding and other sides of the business. So,
okay,
yeah, sorry about that.
Fair enough. No, that's okay. No problem at all.
I need to write a book about it.
Maybe you do. It's not, you're a wealth of knowledge. And, one thing I didn't actually, I failed to really go into is like your robust experience at, Home Depot and Nike and WebMD and Coca-Cola, Vitamin Water. Like you worked with a lot of these big brands. So
yeah. So, I mean, I've consulted, I've been at companies, I've worked around the world, both from on the digital side of things, user experience, and then really helping operationalize things as well. So
maybe you should write that book. Well, all right. Well, Brian, tell us more about if someone wants to get listed on Agency Spotter, what do they need to do? And then how can people reach out to you if they want to follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, perfect. If you go to agencyspotter.com/add agency, and that's ADD agency, you can search and see if your agency's there to claim it or get added as an admin if you're already there, or to add yourself, right? There is a review process, so you're submitting your agency, but while it's being reviewed, you can flesh out your portfolio. So it's really easy. It's free to be there, but you will have limited presence on the free plan, but you can get started, right? And you can start being found. I think that's the easiest thing to do. If you do sign up, you'll get emails from me and my team automatically. So you'll have some contact information, and then you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty open to connecting with folks. If you're serious about doing design, if you are an agency owner or director or somebody who's in the marketing space and is serious about it, I'm pretty much an open connector there. Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, Brian, it's been so great to have you on here. Anyone who's listening and would love to have their agency claimed, go to agencyspotter.com/add agency with 2 Ds. And I really like your platform. And one of the things that I like about your platform is, from what I've seen, is you really spend a lot of time developing relationships on the brand side, which what that means is there's actually people there to buy your stuff. Yeah. Right? It's a directory is kind of useless if there's no traffic to actually be buying your services. So
yeah. Every year we have over 300,000 professionals coming to look for agencies, and I think there's something like 16,000 agencies on there right now. But if you work that equation, some of the math works out in your favor as an agency. Yeah.
Well, especially if you're doing some of the things that you had already recommended for how to actually win the business. And if you're positioning your agency competitively, then really you shouldn't have a problem with the competition.
Yeah. And I mean, our site, you can invite your best clients to give you your first reviews on Agency Spotter. So get in there, get a few reviews, and it's one more thing that can differentiate you as they both find you, or if they didn't find you through Agency Spotter and you're pitching somewhere else, it's you've already got those client testimonials that our team verifies are legitimate that you can reuse. So yeah,
love that. Well, thank you so much again, Brian, for being on the podcast, and again, we really appreciate all the information that you've shared today.
Thanks for having me. Great time. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Hands Off CEO with Mandy Ellefson. If you want to work less and make more, make sure you subscribe and get a new episode every week, and help spread the word by leaving a review.